YouTube folks, it's your friendly spirit of the Wolf Bushwickin. This is part 1, and I have already started taking some knobs off of restoration of the audiophonic transcription player 440 VT made in, and I'll show you, here's the cover of it, made in North Hollywood, California. Just acquired this one. As you can see, it's pretty rough right there on those, but I'll show you better here. On these, you can see they're pretty rusty, so I'm gonna probably be taking these off, cleaning up these screws, cleaning these up, try to replace this with a correct, see if I can't find the correct size. It'll come to me anyways. Find the correct of these little, that's bugging me. I'll think of it later and I'll get back to you guys on it. It is a rivet. That's what they are, rivets. Kind of correct size rivets. And replace those. Shine up some of these. This is kind of a cool feature on this one. This glows. Now, I'm assuming it's to show that power is going to it. This thing does power, but it's kind of weak on the power, so I'm going to be pulling these off. I've numbered the buttons just so they go back in the way they came off. I believe this switch is going to need to be replaced because I think it's pretty beat. And you can see it's free spinning. I couldn't get it to turn at first, and then when I went to turn it, I think I broke something. So I am going to have to replace the switch underneath here. Right here, this is kind of just an assessment of what we're going to need. So right here, we're going to need a new setup for your needle, because that's missing. The wires are there, so we'll have to go through that. I may have to put new wires on it, who knows, depending on how good those wires are. Looks like somebody started to fix this thing up, kinda, and then just lost interest because of the fact that it still works, and it works fairly decent. I have been through the mechanicals on this, kinda just overviewing them, and they appear to be okay. The cord is in pretty decent shape, so we're going to try to relieve that. No frays or nothing in the cord. The end looks fairly clean, so I'm going to try to salvage this old cord because it's not in that bad a shape. And the fact that it still works, what does it say on it? Connected to ground outlet. So it's in pretty good shape. I plugged it into my multi-jack here, as you see there, and those have that little button that it's non-working, and that one still works pretty good. So if this cord was bad, I think it would have automatically kicked it when I flipped it on. But you could see where it was kind of struggling at first to get itself going. So we are going to go through this. This is not a tube capacitor model, so there's no tubes to deal with, which I don't mind working on the tube radios. In record players, I almost prefer them, but these ones are pretty good too, and almost simpler to work on because you don't have to mess with the tubes. So that is a plus. For those of you who are familiar, these are a little bit more easier. I'm going to say probably late 60s, early 70s with this one, because it doesn't have any tubes of any kind, at least from the 60s, the late 60s, at least because of the fact that of the styling of it and the way it's made of paper, but the fact that it doesn't have any actual tubes in here tells me that. This is a pretty cool one. This is very high-tech for its time. It's got all these. You can tell this was a high-tech radio in its day, or a record player in its day, because of the fact that it has the multi-selector, and because of the fact that it doesn't have the tubes. and they had probably just, this was probably made right around the era where they were just starting to phase out of the tubes in the mid to late 60s to early 70s, and I'm going to say most likely late 60s, when tube capacitors were fully phased out for, say, especially metal ones. So that makes this really, that makes this one really easier to work on. For that reason, there's a lot less, because if you have tubes in them, of course, as you know, as most of you know who've worked on these, but for those of you who don't, tubes equals more things to fail, the sockets. But I do love tube radios because they're really fun to work on. But this is part 1 of this one, and I hope that you enjoy this mini-series. We are going to try to revive it. I'm going to say this part is probably $15 to $20, maybe less. I'm hoping $5. I can find one for $5, but I'm going to say from the $5 to $20 range in there for that part. For this switch, I'm hoping possibly in the $2 to $5 range. So keep that in mind when you're working on these. It's also going to need a new pad, as you can see right there. The new pad on there. So that's probably going to be $10 for that pad. We will get that. Like I showed you, it's got some rust repair, but we're going to try to clean up these pieces, clean up the screws, reuse them because the screws are still good. And clean up these ends and get new rivets. I'm going to replace this screw with the correct rivet right there, and just go through this whole radio. I'm not going to do a major restoration, because if you look at this radio versus the Columbia radio that I'm working on, the cabinet looks pretty good. So I think we're going to leave the cabinet alone when we need to, and the cover looks in pretty good shape too. I haven't really looked at it fully. I kind of dusted this radio off, but the cover's not all that bad. You know, it's got imperfections, but it's not to the point where we would warrant the need to redo the covering on this radio. So, little peels in the corner we could probably touch up. Other than that, it's in pretty good shape. And then just clean these brackets on the clean the brackets up on the radio itself. Some of these we might just end up, I might just end up polishing on the radio and just trying to clean them up the best I can on the radio instead of taking them off, because I think on this cover they're buried in here and I really don't want to pull that back. That is a lot of work. So just try to clean them up to the best of my ability. Like that one's pretty corroded, so try my best to clean it up as best as I can. On an ideal restoration, you would want to take this down to bare stock and find new material, but I love the color of this material and I really don't want to take away from that. So that's kind of why I'm trying to preserve this material in the best way that I can. I may end up taking the rivets out of these and just getting bolts, or screw bolts like those for everything, and just simplifying it. Seeing if I can find more like that for this handle, and then possibly getting some of these for those. The downside about these older radios is the fact that they riveted them instead of screw bolted them on, which makes it so you can't take the brackets off without going through the whole thing. But they didn't think about this ever needing done back then. They just made it, figured somebody would use it for how many years, and probably just like thought, you know, this would never need doing. Or maybe their plan was just to make it so people could throw it away and replace it instead of bothering. Here's your number tag right here. Let me flip this around so you can get a view of the other parts of this radio. As you can see, I've taken the knobs off. We have right here, we have the data tag, which is 294985 is a number. Somewhere on, like I said, you're not going to have a fun time trying to date these, but I can almost guesstimate this is probably late 60s. but don't quote me on that. It could be 70s, I could be wrong. It could be mid 60s. I definitely think it's mid through late, because 60s to early 70s, because of the styling of it and the fact that I haven't found any glass tube capacitors or any metal tube capacitors yet to say the big canister capacitors. Not to say there aren't little miniature capacitors in here, like ceramic capacitors and stuff. Of course, that came later, but none of the metal canister or glass tube capacitors have been found in this radio. I'm sure it's got some capacitors of some kind in here. And the fact that it's a transistor tells me that it's most likely closer to the tail end of the mid to tail end of the 60s, because I don't believe they made transistors up until the mid 60s, but quote me if I'm wrong on that. Here's another data tag that says Manchester, New Hampshire, A.H. Rice Co. Inc., Hanover. I'm assuming that's where this was bought. The dealer who sold this new, probably sold it from there, or unless this was a tag put on by somebody later who dealt in radio repair and put their name on there, stickers showing that they repaired this radio. But I'm assuming that's where it could have originally been sold out of. Not 100% sure on that. Again, that's just my assumption. Anyways, this will be a good radio to repair. It will be cool to bring this back to life. It's got the AC logo, the transistor AC logo right here. So that's pretty cool. It says audiophonics AC transistor. So that's cool that this is a transistor combination record player, because I believe that the transistor system was a slightly better quality system back in the day as far as record players go. The transcription transistor player. This is your settings. Right here, your power off. This is your PA system. If you put a microphone into it, you have a first use this jack first, microphone. You can use your PA system for recording, or you can flip it to phono so you can listen to it. This is where you put your mic. This is where you put mic 2. This is the mic impedance, so if you want a high volume mic or a low volume mic, you could also use this radio for, like, say, a radio station. That's what the PA is for, so you can announce over the record player with not necessarily recording it and having it on. A lot of radio stations use stuff like this. This is really quality stuff, especially for radio station. Used things like these, you can tell it's been built with quality, because that they only used the finest products. And I believe Audiophonics was a pretty well-known brand back in these times. So that's pretty cool. So right here you have your low and then your high, or your second mic. And of course it tells you use this jack first. So I'm assuming that second mic you would want to use first. And then you would want to use your first mic last, which is a reversal of what you would actually normally do, because you would think if it says mic 1 to put mic 1 in here first before mic 2, but it's a reversal system according to this, I believe. I've been having a little bit of a struggle getting this deck off, not surprising. It's seized on there. I will find a way to get it off, because I imagine that needs to be cleaned. Because like I said, this deck was moving kind of slow even in 45 and 78. So I'm guessing that it's going to need to be gone through, cleaned up. There's probably some old grease in there, or it's seized to the shaft. Is probably why it's not coming off. But I bet there's some old grease in under there. Terminal grease. That's that's prohibiting this from spinning fully, so that will need to be cleaned up. I'm hoping that's all, and I'm hoping that there's not a major internal issue. I think that pretty much does it for this first video 1 of the audiophonics 440 VT transcription player all transistor. Look for another video on this one. We will do a deeper and delving repair, hoping to fix the little bits on this, and I hope this helps people who are doing this so they have an idea of around what the price range is for parts if you're doing something like this, especially a record player like this of a more quality. This is a type of record player right here of a more quality that you, if you're doing a business for profit, unlike me, this is personal collection. These are the types of record players that you will most likely want to look for, because these are the ones that are most desirable because of how well they were built and stuff. It makes them more desirable, and these ones are harder to come by because these ones tended to be more expensive, and not many people bought these for homeowner use and mostly for radio stations. So these are not as there's not as many of these probably kicking around, so this one's going to be more desirable for that reason because of the rarity. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this for a business and you're looking for the radios that are more valuable. But I can't say that to be in record players and TVs that are more valuable, but I can't say that to be sure. Again, this one's just going in my collection, and I'm going to use this in my future home, so that will be cool. I want to thank you YouTube folks so much for tuning in to this video. I hope this has helped you in repair this a record player of this vintage, or just any record player in general, but especially this model. Look for a part 2 as we delve in deeper into this record player and see if we cannot revive it. Worst case scenario, it'll just be a shelf sitter for me, and that is perfectly fine with me, because just having it on the shelf. But I'm almost guaranteed that this one